February 9th, 1950. The colonnade room of the McClure Hotel has 14 windows and no fire exit visible from the podium. The radiators knock against the baseboard like something trying to get in. 200 women fill the chairs. Republican women. Lincoln Day dinner. Hats and gloves folded over programs. The plates have been cleared. The coffee is cold. A junior senator from Wisconsin is listed as the evening speaker. He flew in from Washington that afternoon. His name is Joseph Raymond McCarthy. He is 41 years old, Irish Catholic. Farm kid from Grand Chute, outside Appleton, Wisconsin. Fifth of 9 children. His father raised cattle and hogs. His mother prayed the rosary every night before bed and died when he was still young enough to hear her voice in rooms where she wasn't. He dropped out of school after 8th grade, started a chicken farm. The chickens died. He enrolled in Little Wolf High School at 20 and finished 4 years of coursework in one. Marquette University for Law. Youngest circuit judge in Wisconsin history. Cleared a backlog of cases that would have taken another judge 3 years. 16-hour days. Every day. He could not stop working. He volunteered for the Marines in 1942. As a judge, he was exempt. Intelligence officer with a Marine dive bomber squadron in the Solomon Islands. 12 combat missions as a gunner observer. Broke his foot during an equator crossing ceremony aboard ship. Later inflated his combat record to 32 missions to qualify for a Distinguished Flying Cross on a commendation he drafted for himself and Admiral Nimitz signed. He ran for Senate and won in the 1946 wave. Defeated Robert La Follette Jr. in the Republican primary while La Follette stayed in Washington and assumed the name would carry the state. McCarthy drove every county road in Wisconsin and shook every hand. He remembered faces. He remembered names. He met you once, and when he saw you again, 6 months later, in a different town, he knew your wife's name and asked about the knee surgery. 3 years in the Senate, and nobody remembered his name. He was a backbench freshman, reliable on domestic votes and forgettable on everything else. He voted for the Marshall Plan, supported NATO, and rarely mentioned communism. He has a piece of paper in his right hand. The advanced press copies distributed that afternoon contain a number, 205. Individuals in the State Department who are known members of the Communist Party or loyal to the Communist Party, still employed, still shaping American foreign policy, no cameras recording, no microphone feeds to a transcription machine. The most consequential domestic speech of the Cold War will survive only in press accounts written afterward. In the Congressional Record version, McCarthy submits 11 days later, and in the memories of 200 women in hats who will be asked for the rest of their lives what they heard. He holds up the paper. The room goes quiet. Whether the paper contains a list, a letter, notes from a briefing, or nothing at all will be debated for 75 years after this evening. Whether he says 205 or 57 or 81 will depend on who is asked and when. The number will shift in every retelling. It will never stabilize because There is no recording to anchor it. But the paper is in the air, and the women are watching. 2 days later, McCarthy sends a telegram to President Truman. He requests that the State Department's loyalty files be opened to the Senate. He asks the President to revoke the executive order that blocks congressional committees from reviewing the files of federal employees accused of disloyalty. Truman dismisses the telegram. The hand is steady. The room is full. No one in the colonnade room knows that the proof of what this man is claiming sits in a filing cabinet at the National Security Agency under a code name none of them have heard, in a program so classified that even the president may not know its full scope. The proof exists. The man with the paper cannot reach it. The man who can reach it will not share it. The paper is in the air. Washington, D.C., June 1947. A Senate Appropriations Subcommittee produces a classified memorandum addressed to the Secretary of State, George Catlett Marshall. The language is bureaucratic, which is to say, it is the language of men who know they are documenting something they will not be allowed to say aloud. The memo describes a deliberate, calculated program being carried out to shield communist personnel at every level of power to reduce security and intelligence protection to a nullity. It names 9 officials. It says they are only a few of the hundreds. Marshall receives the memo. He does not order an investigation, does not fire the 9 named officials, does not respond to the subcommittee. He does not acknowledge receipt. Between June 1947 and February 1950, the State Department does not discharge a single employee as a loyalty or security risk. Other federal agencies in the same period discharge over 300. 300 from the departments that read the warnings, 0 from the department the warnings were about. In 1946, Secretary of State James Burns had written to Congress about a screening program for employees transferred from wartime agencies. Of approximately 4,000 people screened, 284 were recommended against permanent employment. Only 79 were actually separated. The rest stayed. The Burns letter was published in the Congressional Record in 1946. It was available to anyone who wanted to read it. For 4 years, nobody did. Elsewhere in Washington, in a windowless room with a combination lock, a signals intelligence program called Venona is producing results. FBI cryptanalysts have been decoding intercepted Soviet intelligence messages since 1943. The intercepts confirm what the classified memo to Marshall describes: espionage networks operating inside the federal government. Names, pseudonyms, meeting locations, drop points, assignments. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover knows about Venona. He has known since the program's inception. The intelligence is real. The threat is confirmed. Hoover does not share Venona with Congress, with McCarthy, or with the State Department. He barely shares it with the President. The most tightly held secret in American intelligence confirms the most explosive accusation in American politics. And the two will not meet for 45 years. Somewhere between the classified memo that Marshall put in a drawer and the signals intelligence that Hoover locked in a vault, a junior senator from Wisconsin receives fragments. Intelligence that arrives through intermediaries, names and case numbers that track to existing government files. Enough to know that the State Department has a problem. Not enough to prove it in a hearing room. The question the senator will carry for the rest of his life, the question that will survive him by decades, is not whether the intelligence was accurate. The Venona files will eventually confirm that it was. The question is, who gave it to him and why? The drawer closes. The memo is inside. It will not be opened again until McCarthy is dead, and the files are declassified, and the men who sealed the drawer are past the reach of any subcommittee. Washington, D.C., 1933. A man named Harold Ware came to Washington in 1933 with the New Deal still wet on the page. He was an agricultural expert. His mother was Ella Reeve Bloor, who the party called Mother Bloor. And the party had no more famous mother in America. Ware had carried American tractors into the Soviet Union a decade earlier under a name that was not his own, and taught the Soviets to farm at scale. Now he came home to a capital that was hiring. The agencies were new, half-staffed. The desks were empty and nobody yet knew who belonged at them. Ware placed people. He found young lawyers and economists with the right sympathies and moved them into the offices while the offices were still being built. He told them to carry no cards, to attend no meetings, to become on the surface ordinary government employees. The instruction was the tradecraft. A cell that never meets cannot be photographed at a meeting. The top of it was 7 or 8 men. Nathan Witt, Lee Pressman, John Apt, Henry Collins, Victor Perlow, a young State Department lawyer named Alger Hiss, and his brother Donald. They were placements. The espionage came later when the placements had risen. Ware died in 1935. A road near Harrisburg, a coal truck, a man who drove fast. The death was ruled accidental, and nothing in the files since has said otherwise. The cell did not die with him. A Comintern officer named J. Peters reassigned it, and the holding of it passed to a heavy, soft-spoken man named Whittaker Chambers, who would later decide he could not hold it any longer. Chambers left the party in 1938. In 1939, he went to the government and told an assistant secretary of state what he knew. He gave names. He was heard and written down and filed. The country was about to need the Soviet Union, and a man with a story about cells in the agencies was a cost the coming war would not pay. The name sat where Chambers left them for 9 years. In August of 1948, a congressional committee subpoenaed him. He named the men he had known in the underground, and the name the room reached for was Hiss, because Hiss had risen highest. Alger Hiss had helped staff the conference at Yalta. He had stood at the founding of the United Nations. He was the kind of man the accusation was not built to touch. Hiss came 2 days later and denied all of it. He denied the party. He denied knowing Chambers at all. The room believed the pressed man over the rumpled one and turned on the rumpled one. They said Chambers was unstable, a liar with a grudge. They went into his old life and his private one and held up both as reasons to set the testimony down. The accusation was not answered. The accuser was diagnosed. Then the rumpled man produced paper. 65 pages of State Department cables retyped on a machine that traced to Hiss's house. 4 pages in Hiss's own hand. And on a farm in Maryland, inside a hollowed pumpkin in a field, 5 rolls of microfilm. Photographs of documents that were never meant to leave the building. The proof had been real the whole time. It had been sitting in a pumpkin while the man who held it was called insane. The espionage was too old to charge. They charged Hiss with lying about it. In January of 1950, a jury convicted him. Chambers was not the first. In 1945, a woman named Elizabeth Bentley had walked into the FBI and given them dozens of names, whole networks of them, running through the Treasury and the war agencies. She was doubted too. They called her unstable, a spinster with a grievance, and set the testimony aside. The decrypts would confirm her later, the way they would confirm Chambers. By the time McCarthy stood up, the government had been warned twice in detail by people who had been inside, and had twice found the messenger easier to break than the message. Weeks later, a backbench senator stood up in Wheeling with a paper in his hand. He had not built the network, and he had not broken it. Someone handed him fragments, case numbers that ran to real files, names that matched names already flagged and buried in the loyalty program. Enough to know the thing was real, not enough to prove it alone against the executive branch with the files locked, who reached into the drawer and gave a piece of it to the loudest senator available. And why they chose him is the question that outlives everyone in it. The machine that would break him was already built. It had been tested once on the man with the pumpkin. McCarthy was the second run. United States Senate. February 20th, 1950, 11 days after Wheeling. McCarthy rises and takes the floor. He will hold it for 6 hours. The chamber is half empty at the start. By midnight, it will be nearly vacant. The public gallery empties at 10. The press gallery thins by 11. The janitor sweeps the corridor outside the chamber and waits. McCarthy reads from numbered cases. Case 1, Case 2, Case 14, Case 40, Case 57. The cases are drawn from the Lee list, compiled by Robert E. Lee, the lead investigator for the House Appropriations Committee. 108 unresolved State Department security cases, published in subcommittee proceedings 2 years earlier, available in any congressional reading room to anyone who cared to pick up the volume. McCarthy reads the cases into the record. He does not name names. He uses case numbers. He describes the background of each individual, their affiliations, their associations, the flags raised during security screening, the recommendations for discharge that were overridden, the reassignments, that moved compromised personnel to new positions rather than out the door. Democratic senators rotate in shifts. Scott Lucas of Illinois, Brian McMahon of Connecticut, Herbert Lehman of New York. They interrupt 123 times. The interruptions follow a pattern. They are not about the substance of the cases. They are about the numbers. The senator said 205 at Wheeling, McCarthy explains. 205 was the Burns figure. The Secretary's letter to Congress. 4,000 screened, 284 flagged, 79 actually removed. The remaining pool of unresolved cases. 57 was the specific set of cases McCarthy was presenting tonight. He explains it clearly. He explains it repeatedly. He explains it at 11:15 and again at 12:30 and again at 1 in the morning to a chamber with 9 senators remaining and a stenographer whose fingers have not stopped. The explanation is internally consistent. It tracks to the Burns letter, which is in the congressional record. It tracks to the Lee list, which is in the Appropriations Committee files. The 57 are a subset of the 205. It will be ignored for 75 years. The interruptions serve a purpose beyond clarification. Each one costs time. Each one breaks the rhythm of McCarthy's presentation and forces him to relitigate the number rather than advance the evidence. By the third hour, the press coverage is set. McCarthy claims communists in State Department. Numbers shift, inconsistencies noted. The substance of the 57 cases does not make the morning papers. The number discrepancy does. At midnight, the gallery is empty. The senators on the Democratic side have thinned too. McCarthy is still reading case numbers into the record. His voice has not dropped. His collar is damp. A water glass sits untouched on the desk. He reads case 72. An employee in the Division of Security who was himself flagged as a security risk, assigned to evaluate the loyalty of others. He reads case 77. An individual whose file contains a notation that he was furnishing information to a foreign intelligence service, retained. He reads case 81. A transferee from another agency who was rejected by that agency as a loyalty risk, hired by the State Department without a new screening. Nobody in this room knows the name of the program that already holds the proof. They will not hear it for 45 years. Venona. McCarthy gathers his papers. The chamber is empty except for the presiding officer and the stenographer. He steps down from the floor. His shoes echo in the corridor. The janitor is sweeping around the edges of the chamber. He does not look up. Washington, D.C., spring 1950. The Senate creates a subcommittee to investigate McCarthy's charges. The official mandate: determine whether persons disloyal to the United States are employed by the State Department. Chairman Millard Tydings, Democrat, Maryland, 4-term incumbent. The appointment is not random. Tydings is the man the Democratic leadership trusts to deliver a verdict they have already written. 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans. The math tells the story before the first witness is sworn. McCarthy presents 9 cases, named individuals, documented backgrounds, cross-referenced with existing government screening files. He brings the Lee list, the Burns letter, and memoranda from the State Department's own security office recommending that specific employees be discharged. The committee does not investigate the 9 cases. The committee investigates McCarthy. Witnesses McCarthy calls are not permitted extended testimony. Documents he submits are received into the record, but not examined in open session. The Republicans on the committee file dissenting reports that are printed, bound, shelved, and forgotten. Tidings runs the hearings with the patience of a man who already knows the final page of the report. The questions are not designed to determine whether the State Department employs disloyal persons. The questions are designed to determine whether McCarthy can prove it to a standard that no one-man operation denied access to classified files could meet. Can the senator produce the original loyalty files? No. The executive order blocks congressional access. Can the senator name his sources? He will not. Naming a source inside the executive branch is the fastest way to ensure that no source inside the executive branch ever speaks to a senator again. Can the senator explain the discrepancy between 205 and 57? He can. He does. Again, July 1950. The committee issues its report. McCarthy's charges are a fraud and a hoax perpetrated on the Senate of the United States and the American people. A fraud and a hoax. The phrase will appear in textbooks for the next 70 years. It will be presented as the definitive finding of a bipartisan investigation, though the investigation was partisan by design. The finding was unanimous only among the Democrats, and the 2 Republicans dissented on every material point. What the textbooks will not mention: the Senate's own staff investigation into the Wheeling speech. Senator William Benton of Connecticut charges that McCarthy said 205 at Wheeling. The Senate sends investigators. They travel to West Virginia, interview witnesses who were in the colonnade room, and compile a 44-page staff memorandum. The memo finds no evidence to support Benton's charge. Senate Democrats receive the memo. They do not publish it, do not reference it, do not include it in the committee's findings. The 44 pages are filed and forgotten. They have never been prominently published in any mainstream history of the McCarthy era. The committee created to investigate infiltration investigated the man who reported it. The staff report that supported McCarthy was buried by the committee that condemned him. The public record reads, fraud and hoax. The classified record reads, no evidence to support the charge against the accuser. November 1950. McCarthy campaigns against Tidings in Maryland. He is effective and relentless. He goes county by county, the way he went county by county in Wisconsin. Tidings, a 4-term incumbent who assumed the seat was permanent, loses re-election. The message moves through the Senate like voltage through a wire. Oppose McCarthy and lose your seat. McCarthy's political power reaches its peak. Every senator in both parties calculates the cost of crossing him. His political stock has never been higher. His reputation is already dying. The two curves will not intersect for 4 more years. Tidings campaign office the morning after the election. A desk with nothing on it. A phone that is stopped. December 12th, 1950. The Soulgrave Club, DuPont Circle. A birthday dinner for a senator. Joseph McCarthy and Drew Pearson, the most syndicated columnist in America and the man who has spent 10 months filleting him in 600 newspapers, arrive at the coat check at the same time. Pearson reaches for his coat. McCarthy puts his hand on it and holds it down. You've written about me 41 times since February, Drew. You count them? I count everything. Pearson looks at the hand on his coat, then at the man. He is taller than McCarthy and 20 years smoother, and he has ended more careers than the senator has started. He smiles the smile he uses on press secretaries. They don't hate you for counting, Joe. They hate you because you believe it. The ones who do it for the headlines can be managed. He lifts McCarthy's hand off the coat the way a man removes a price tag. You actually think you're going to save the country. A true believer with subpoena power. They will never let you keep it. McCarthy knees him. Pearson goes into the coat rack. Hangers ring on the rail. The new senator from California steps between them before the second blow lands and walks McCarthy out into the cold of DuPont Circle. The columnist straightens his coat and asks the attendant for his hat. The next morning's column does not mention it. Pearson saves it. He spends it for years, one anecdote at a time, at the dinner tables that matter. The night Joe McCarthy hit me at the Soulgrave Club, Washington, D., January 1953. The 83rd Congress convenes. Republicans control both chambers for the first time since 1933. Dwight Eisenhower is in the White House. Joseph Raymond McCarthy, Jr., Senator from Wisconsin, becomes chairman of the Committee on Government Operations and its permanent subcommittee on investigations. For the first time in his career, he holds the gavel. He controls the staff, the agenda, the subpoena power. He builds a team. Roy Cohn, 26 years old, New York, prosecuted Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. A prosecutor's instincts and a trial lawyer's refusal to ask a question he doesn't already know the answer to. Chief Counsel Robert F. Kennedy, 27, hired at his father's urging. Joe Kennedy Sr. has given McCarthy money, Catholic institutional credibility, and access to the Kennedy network. Now he gives him a son, Assistant Counsel G. David Shine, 25, wealthy, author of a pamphlet on communism that nobody on the committee has read. Chief Consultant Francis Carr, Executive Director Ruth Young Watt, Chief Clerk. The investigators Robert McElroy, Herbert Hawkins, James Juliana. The machinery of a Senate investigation assembled in weeks. McCarthy opens hearings on the State Department and the CIA, the Voice of America, the Army Signal Corps at Fort Monmouth, communist infiltration among Army civilian workers, the Teacher-Student Exchange Program, the Government Printing Office Security Division, and trade with Soviet bloc countries. The scope is enormous. The pace is relentless. McCarthy works the way he has always worked. 16 hours, no breaks, no days off, the same bottomless energy that cleared the judicial backlog in Wisconsin and drove every county road in the state twice. The results are real. 395 witnesses testify in executive session across 1953. 8,969 pages of testimony. 83 witnesses invoked the Fifth Amendment when asked about Communist Party membership. 24 individuals with documented communist backgrounds are discharged from positions handling classified material. The file destruction program in the State Department is documented in sworn testimony, employees systematically destroying personnel security evaluation files. The files that would have documented who was flagged, who was protected, who was retained despite security recommendations for discharge. 4 days of hearings on file destruction alone, January 26th through January 29th. Witness after witness describing the process. Fort Monmouth's security penetration is confirmed, not by McCarthy's allegations, which the press dismisses, by the facts that emerged decades later. Senator Barry Goldwater will reveal in his 1979 memoir that Senator Carl Hayden, the senior Democrat on the Appropriations Committee, told him privately that Monmouth had to be relocated because senior Democrats were convinced security had been compromised. They relocated the facility rather than admit McCarthy had identified a real problem. Cohn runs the interrogations. He is precise, aggressive, effective. The witnesses who invoke the Fifth are not innocent bystanders caught in a dragnet. They are individuals with documented affiliations, confirmed associations, and access to classified material who refuse under oath to answer whether they are or have been members of the Communist Party. The hearings are productive. They are also sealed. The executive sessions classify the transcripts locked away from the public. The American people will not read what the subcommittee found until January 2003, when the executive session transcripts are finally declassified. By then, McCarthy will have been dead for 46 years. The word bearing his name will have been in a dictionary for half a century. And the files will show that the investigations produced exactly what he said they would produce. The sealed transcripts being typed, page after page. 50 years from daylight. Washington, D.C. January 2003. The National Archives releases the executive session transcripts of the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. 5 volumes, 8,969 pages, classified for 50 years. What follows is what the seal concealed. File destruction in the Department of State. January 26, 1953. Testimony of John Matson, a State Department employee. Matson describes the procedure. Personnel security files flagged for review are pulled from the archives and routed to supervisors who determine their disposition. Files recommended for discontinuance are destroyed, the paper trail eliminated, and the individuals whose files are destroyed remain employed. January 27. Testimony of Helen Belloc. She describes the volume, hundreds of files processed. The destruction's not random. It is systematic. And the files marked for removal are the ones that would document security concerns about specific employees. So the files that survive are the clean ones, and the files that disappear are the ones that would have confirmed what McCarthy told the Senate. January 28th. Testimony of Malvina Kerr and Vladimir Tumanov. January 29th. Testimony of Robert Ryan and Mansfield Hunt. 4 days of witnesses describing the same program from different positions within the bureaucracy. The picture assembles itself. The State Department did not merely fail to act on security concerns. It destroyed the evidence that the concerns existed. Voice of America. February through March 1953. McCarthy's subcommittee examines the State Department's international broadcasting arm. Witnesses describe editorial decisions that align VOA programming with positions favorable to Soviet diplomatic objectives. Louis McKesson testifies. Edwin Kretzmann testifies. Howard Fast, the novelist and admitted Communist Party member, testifies about his work's promotion through VOA channels. The VOA investigation is not fully corroborated in every particular, but the hearings produce enough to raise the core question of who decides what the government's international voice broadcasts to the world, and whose interests those decisions serve. Army Signal Corps, October through December 1953. Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, the Army's top-secret research facility. McCarthy's subcommittee documents security violations over the course of 26 hearing days. Dozens of witnesses, hundreds of pages. Individuals with confirmed Communist Party affiliations holding positions with access to classified signal intelligence research. The testimony is specific. Names, dates, party membership cards, attendance at cell meetings, contacts with known Soviet intelligence operatives. The witnesses are not hypothetical security risks. They are documented ones. Transfer of occupation currency plates. October and November 1953. Treasury officials testifying about a decision made at the end of the Second World War. The United States gave the Soviet Union duplicate engraving plates for printing Allied occupation currency in Germany. The Soviets printed billions in marks and used them to purchase goods and assets across occupied Europe. The American taxpayer absorbed the cost. Elizabeth Bentley, the former Soviet courier who had already named dozens of government agents, testifies about how the financial penetration was coordinated. Communist infiltration among Army civilian workers, August through September 1953. Testimony documenting Communist Party members embedded in Army facilities across the country. Doris Walters Powell, Francesco Palmiero, Albert Feldman. They testify. Some invoke the Fifth. Some cooperate. The hearings document a pattern. Individuals flagged by security screening, retained despite the flags, given access to facilities and materials they should never have touched. The reader now holds what the public could not hold for half a century. The investigations were real. The witnesses testified under oath. The The security failures and the file destruction were documented. The Fifth Amendment invocations recorded, the discharges processed. Then the transcripts were sealed, the classification stamp pressed into the cover of each volume, the volumes placed in storage, the lock turned, the key filed. And the man who ordered the investigations was called a fraud. The file cabinet. Government issue. The label reads Executive Sessions. Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. The date of declassification, January 2003. 50 years of silence in a metal box. The silence is over. The files are public. The findings are what they are. Washington, D.C. August 1953. Robert Francis Kennedy walks out of the Permanent Subcommittee's offices on the third floor of the Senate Office Building. He is 27 years old. He has been on McCarthy's staff for 7 months. He has clashed with Roy Cohn since the first week. Kennedy believes the infiltration is real. He believes the investigations are necessary. He believes the subcommittee is producing results that matter. What he does not believe is that Cohn's management of the operation will survive the scrutiny that the results will attract. Cohn runs the hearing room like a courtroom. He is effective. He is also 26, and he carries the certainty of a man who has never been defeated and therefore does not plan for the possibility. The subcommittee's investigations have attracted attention from the press, the Democratic minority, the Army, and the Eisenhower White House. All four are looking for a seam. Cohn's relationship with Shine is a seam. Kennedy comes to the office with his resignation in his jacket pocket. McCarthy is signing letters. Sit down, Bobby. I'll stand. The pen keeps moving. Your father called me twice this week. You know what he wants? I'm not here about my father. He wants you in Roy's chair. McCarthy signs the last letter and squares the stack. So say what you came to say. The calls to the Army, the passes, the weekends in New York, every one of them is documented, Joe. Dates, times, the name of the officer who took the call. They're not going to fight you on Monmouth. The files are real, and they know the files are real. They'll pull the thread Roy handed them, and the discharges, the file destruction, all of it goes into the ground as the operation that broke an Army private's weekend pass. McCarthy gets up and goes to the window. The Capitol dome sits white in the August haze. He speaks with his back to the room. Taft told me to slow down. Dirksen says be careful. The whip says be quiet. He turns around. Every man who tells me to be quiet has a reason, Bobby. The reason is never that the evidence is insufficient. I'm not telling you to be quiet. Fire Roy. Roy put 83 of them in front of the Fifth Amendment. Roy is going to bury you. Then I'll be buried with the files open. He comes back to the desk and picks up the pen. You quitting? Kennedy lays the letter on the desk. McCarthy sets a stack of signed correspondence on top of it, without reading it. Tell your father it was my decision. Kennedy closes the door. The door closed. He does not fire Cohn. Cohn is the engine. The 83 Fifth Amendment invocations were Cohn's interrogations. The 24 discharges his cases. The file destruction hearings his sequencing. Remove Cohn and the subcommittee loses its most effective instrument at the moment when the investigations are producing their most significant results. Kennedy leaves. He walks out of the building and into a career that will take him to the Attorney General's office, to the Senate. He will attend McCarthy's funeral in 1957. He will never explain why. The Democrats on the subcommittee left before Kennedy did. July 10th, 1953. John McClellan of Arkansas. Henry Jackson of Washington. Stuart Symington of Missouri. They walked out and will disappear from proceedings until January 25th, 1954. The chairman has the floor. 6 months of empty chairs on the minority side of the hearing table. The absence creates the narrative. McCarthy ran a one-party operation. The findings are suspect. The fact that the Democrats made them suspect by leaving is not part of the narrative. McCarthy's operation narrows. The widest investigation in Senate history is now conducted by one party. The sealed transcripts will show that the investigations continued to produce results during the boycott. The photograph that survives is the empty chairs. The sidewalk outside the Senate office building. August. Washington heat. Kennedy on the curb. A car pulls up. He gets in. 4 years from now, he will stand at McCarthy's grave in Appleton. 14 years from now, he will be in his own. Washington, D.C., 1953. The Voice of America investigation produces a body. McCarthy's subcommittee examines VOA for evidence that the State Department's International Broadcasting Service has been editorially influenced by individuals sympathetic to communist objectives. The investigation centers on programming decisions, the placement of transmitter facilities, and the promotion of content by writers with documented party affiliations. Raymond Kaplan is an engineer at the VOA transmitter facility. He is not a communist, not under investigation, a technical employee who has watched the morale of his agency collapse under the weight of the hearing. In March 1953, Kaplan steps in front of a truck in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He leaves a note. The note says he has not been able to sleep, that the pressure is unbearable. It does not blame McCarthy by name. The suicide becomes a story. Not the investigation's findings, not the editorial questions about programming content. The witnesses who testified that VOA output aligned with Soviet diplomatic objectives, or Howard Fast, the admitted Communist Party member whose work was promoted through VOA channels. The dead engineer. This is the template. For the next 75 years, every investigation into institutional failure will be countered the same way. Find the human cost, center the human cost, erase the institutional question. The investigation becomes about the damage it causes. The question shifts from, was VOA compromised, to, was the investigation worth a man's life? The second question cancels the first. The press coverage does not ask who was making editorial decisions at VOA. It asks whether McCarthy's hearings are destroying innocent people. The framing inverts the investigation. The committee examining the institution becomes the institution's aggressor, and the institution being examined becomes the victim. Robert Taft, the Republican leader in the Senate, watches the damage accumulate. His assessment is practical. McCarthy's investigations are producing results, but the political cost of the results is becoming unsustainable. Taft's solution is to move McCarthy to a committee chairmanship where the investigations will be less visible, where he can't do any harm, as Taft puts it. Taft does not disagree with McCarthy's findings. He disagrees with the cost of making the findings public. The party needs the Senate. The Senate needs stability. McCarthy is unstable because the things he is finding are demonstrably dangerous to people who have the power to make the finding process more expensive than the findings are worth. The engineer's desk at the VOA facility cleared. Personal effects in a cardboard box by the door. On someone else's desk, the investigation file sits open. The pages are face down. Nobody is reading them. CBS Studios, New York City, March 9th, 1954. Edward R. Murrow sits in a darkened studio. Cigarette smoke. The red light on the camera. See It Now, the CBS documentary series Murrow created with Fred Friendly, is about to broadcast the most consequential 30 minutes of television in American political history. The program has been in preparation for 2 months. Murrow's team has assembled footage of McCarthy from hearings, press conferences, and public appearances. The footage has been selected with the precision of a prosecution. McCarthy sweating under lights. McCarthy belching during a recess, picking his nose, interrupting a witness. McCarthy hectoring, hunched, the 5 o'clock shadow and the heavy brow, the finger jabbing at the camera. No footage of McCarthy in a professional exchange. None of the witnesses invoking the Fifth Amendment, the file destruction testimony, the Fort Monmouth findings, the 24 discharges, or the 83 people who refused under oath to say whether they had served the Communist Party. John Cogley of Commonweal, a Catholic magazine with no sympathy for McCarthy's methods, reviews the broadcast and calls it a distorted summary using selected video clips. Arthur Herman, in his biography of McCarthy, will document that Murrow employed exactly the same techniques of partial truth and innuendo that critics accused McCarthy of using. Eric Severide, the Dean of Broadcast Journalism, Murrow's own colleague, says the program came awfully late. McCarthy is offered airtime to respond. April 6, 1954. He uses the rebuttal to present Murrow's documented associations with Communist Front organizations. The Harold Velda House report naming Murrow the Institute of International Education Fellowship. Murrow administered that funded students with communist ties. The rebuttal airs. It has no effect. The technique is now established. 60 years before algorithmic suppression, before digital deplatforming, before coordinated debanking, Murrow demonstrates the template. Selective editing, unflattering visual presentation, institutional amplification, and the denial of context. The target is reframed as a character. The audience does not evaluate the findings. It evaluates the man. And the man on camera sweats. Gallup polls the week after the broadcast. McCarthy's net favorable rating drops from +10 to -8, an 18-point swing, the largest decline of his entire career, not from a Senate investigation, not from a committee finding, not from a court ruling, from a television broadcast. The word McCarthyism has been in circulation since 1950. Herbert Bloch, the Washington Post editorial cartoonist, coined it in a cartoon depicting a tower of tar buckets. By 1954, the word has colonized the language. It means paranoid accusation. It means reckless smear. It means witch hunt. What the man had been doing was documenting institutional compromise with evidence drawn from government files, corroborated by witness testimony, and confirmed by Fifth Amendment invocations from individuals with documented Communist Party affiliations. After 1954, anyone who names institutional infiltration can be dismissed as a McCarthyite. The word does not require evidence to deploy. It does not require a rebuttal of the underlying claim. It is a diagnostic label applied to the act of seeing. The witness becomes the disease. The diagnosis replaces the investigation. The apparatus did not answer McCarthy's charges. It named them. And the name was enough. The word in the dictionary. It will outlive the man it was made from. It will outlive the evidence that proved the man it describes had the intelligence the institutions denied. Senate Caucus Room, April 22nd, 1954. The Klieg lights are on. 3 networks. The BC carries the hearings gavel to gavel. An estimated 20 million Americans watch daily. The proximate cause of the Army McCarthy hearings is Roy Cohn. He made calls to the Army on behalf of G. David Schein, who was drafted in November 1953. Cohn wanted Schein assigned to New York. He wanted weekend passes. He wanted Schein exempted from the duties that every other private in the United States Army performed without question. The Army documented every call, dates, times, the names of the officers who answered. Then the Army filed charges against Cohn and, by extension, against McCarthy. McCarthy's countercharge. The Army was holding Schein hostage to force the subcommittee to abandon its investigation of security breaches at Fort Monmouth. The committee will later conclude that McCarthy himself did not personally exert improper influence on Schein's behalf. Cohn did. The distinction will be noted in the report and ignored in every subsequent account. The hearings last 36 days, 188 hours of testimony, 2 million words in the transcript. The substance concerns who pressured whom about one private's duty assignment. The substance does not matter. What matters is the camera. Joseph Raymond McCarthy was built for print. His afternoon press conferences gave reporters enough to fill the evening editions, but not enough time to cross-examine before deadline. In the morning papers, McCarthy's energy read as conviction. his certainty as authority, his volume as the sound of a man who had the goods. On a 19-inch television screen, the same energy reads differently. The 5 o'clock shadow, the sweat gathering at the temples under 2,000-watt lights, the interruptions that commanded a Senate hearing room and look on camera like a man who cannot let another person finish a sentence, the heavy brow, the finger jabbing at the witness table. The camera does not evaluate evidence. The camera evaluates skin. Joseph Nye Welch, the Army's special counsel, 63 years old, Boston, bow tie, spectacles he removes on cue. A trial lawyer who understands that the courtroom is theater and that television is a larger courtroom. On June 9th, 1954, McCarthy mentions during testimony that a young lawyer in Welch's firm, Frederick Fisher, had been a member of the National Lawyers Guild, which the House Committee on Un-American Activities had identified as a Communist Front organization. Welch has prepared for this moment. Fisher had already been removed from the Army's legal team for exactly this reason. Welch knew the vulnerability existed. He left it visible. McCarthy takes the bait. Welch removes his spectacles, pauses. The pause is 3 seconds long. On television, 3 seconds is a lifetime. Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You have done enough. Have you no sense of decency, sir, at long last? Have you left no sense of decency? The gallery applauds. The camera holds on McCarthy's face. The 2,000-watt Klieg lights illuminate every surface. The heavy brow, the jowl, the 5 o'clock shadow that no amount of shaving could erase. The sweat from the first hours of the morning is now visible on his temples, gathering in the creases of his forehead. He opens his mouth to respond, closes it. His hand reaches for a glass of water that is no longer in front of him. He turns to Cohn, and his jaw moves without sound. What happened? What happened? A performance. Welch's timing was precise. The pause before "at long last" was metered. The catch in his voice arrived on cue. The spectacles came off at the exact moment the camera needed them to come off. The gallery is still applauding when the chairman calls a recess. McCarthy sits at the table. The red light on the nearest camera goes dark. He's still talking. Cohn is gathering papers. The room is emptying. But the image recorded in the minds of 20 million Americans is McCarthy, the face. The light catches the sweat. The microphone amplifies the silence where there should have been words. The apparatus has turned the camera into a weapon, and the weapon does not fire bullets. It fires photographs that will circulate for 70 years. On a monitor in the control room, McCarthy's face fills the screen. The broadcast has cut away. He is talking to a room that is no longer listening. United States Senate, December 2nd, 1954. The roll call takes 11 minutes. The clerk reads 92 names. The tally, 67 to 22. Democrats, unanimous. Every Democrat who casts a vote votes to condemn. Republicans, split down the middle. Half vote against McCarthy, half refuse. John F. Kennedy, the junior senator from Massachusetts, is in a hospital bed recovering from back surgery. He does not vote. He issues no statement. He does not pair his vote, the standard procedure for a senator absent due to illness. The record is silence. His brother Robert served on McCarthy's staff. His father funded McCarthy's campaigns. Joe Kennedy Sr. considered McCarthy a family friend. Kennedy's absence is noted. It is never explained. Theodore Sorensen will draft 6 different statements for Kennedy to release. None are released. The Watkins Committee had grouped the charges into 5 categories. By the time of the vote, he is condemned on 2 counts. Count 1. Failure to cooperate with the Subcommittee on Privileges and Elections during the 82nd Congress. The subcommittee had invited McCarthy to testify about his finances. He declined. The invitation was not a subpoena. No senator in American history had been censured for declining an invitation. Count 2. His description of the Watkins Committee as the unwitting handmaiden of the Communist Party. Conduct tending to bring the Senate into disrepute. During the same session of Congress, senators on the floor called McCarthy a liar, a demagogue, and a blackmailer. Senator Ralph Flanders of Vermont publicly suggested that McCarthy's relationship with Cohn and Schein was sexual. None of these senators were censured for bringing the Senate into disrepute. The 2 counts sit in the record. They are what they are. Behind the vote, pressure. Eisenhower's White House wants McCarthy finished. The reason is not that McCarthy was fabricating charges. The reason is that McCarthy attacked the Army during a Republican presidency. 20 years of treason was the slogan when the Democrats held the executive branch. Useful rhetoric. 21 years of treason was the slogan when your own party held it. Unacceptable. More than a dozen Republican senators tell McCarthy privately that they do not want to vote against him. The pressure from the administration is enormous. Dirksen lobbies for McCarthy openly. Goldwater votes against condemnation and will say for the rest of his career that it was one of his proudest votes. McCarthy could apologize. He could moderate. He could accept the diminished role and survive as a backbencher. Every senator who faces institutional pressure makes this calculation. Most bend. McCarthy does not bend. His influence evaporates overnight. No chairmanship, no subpoena power, no staff, no platform. He was a one-man operation, and one-man operations can be shut down with 1 vote. Democrats take Congress in the November elections. McCarthy is a minority member of a party that has no further use for him, in a chamber that has condemned him, in a country where his name is already a word meaning the opposite of what he meant by it. The Senate chamber after the vote. The gallery empties. The press files out. McCarthy stands at his desk. His papers are in a leather folder. The folder is closed. He is the last man in the room. The door is open. He does not walk through it. Bethesda Naval Hospital, Maryland. April to May 1957. The room is on an upper floor. The windows face east, toward the parking lot and the tree line beyond it. The curtains are drawn. The morphine drip keeps the pain at a distance that allows conversation, but not much else. Joseph Raymond McCarthy is 48 years old. He has been drinking since the censure. By January 1957, he consumed a fifth of whiskey a day. By April, the quantity had quadrupled. The acceleration is documented. What changed in January to drive it is not in the record. Jean is in the room. They adopted Tierney 4 months ago. She is an infant. McCarthy holds her once on a Thursday afternoon in late April. A nurse adjusts the IV line. Jean takes the baby back. The death certificate read, hepatitis, acute, cause unknown. The building is Bethesda Naval Hospital. James Forrestal, the first Secretary of Defense, fell from a 16th floor window of this building on May 22, 1949. The death was ruled suicide. Forrestal's diary, 2,800 pages, was seized by the Truman administration hours after his death, published at 581 pages. The gap between what Forrestal wrote and what the public was allowed to read, 79%. The gap between Forrestal's death and McCarthy's Wheeling speech, 9 months. The gap between McCarthy's censure and McCarthy's death, 29 months. The question the senator will carry for the rest of his life is one he will never answer in public. Who gave it to him? The source was never named. When McCarthy dies, the question dies with him. May 2nd, 1957. McCarthy dies. Jean is present. He is given a state funeral in the Senate chamber. 70 senators attend. The first Senate funeral in 17 years. Thousands view the body in Washington. More than 17,000 file through St. Mary's Church in Appleton, Wisconsin. 3 senators fly to Wisconsin on the plane carrying his casket. Robert Kennedy attends the funeral. He does not speak. 1995. The National Security Agency declassifies the Venona transcripts. 3,000 intercepted Soviet intelligence messages decoded between 1943 and 1980. Code names resolved to real names. Harry Dexter White in the Treasury, under variations of jurist. Alger Hiss in the State Department, under Alice. The messages confirm espionage networks operating inside the departments McCarthy had been pointing at. The decryption had been slow because the one-time pads had been reused under wartime pressure. Only a fraction of the traffic ever opened, and turning the readable groups into names took years of work by a handful of people who had already decided the country would not be shown the drawer while McCarthy was alive. 2003. The Senate releases the sealed executive session transcripts. 5 volumes, 8,969 pages. 50 years in a government vault. The investigations documented security failures. Fifth Amendment invocations, file destruction, discharges, infiltration in the agencies McCarthy had named. The transcripts confirm that the subcommittee investigated what McCarthy said it investigated, found what McCarthy said it found, and documented what McCarthy said it documented. 2012. M. Stanton Evans and Herbert Romerstein published their analysis. Of McCarthy's cases, the evidence aligns with what the Venona decrypts and FBI files independently confirm. The State Department harbored individuals whose loyalties were compromised, whose files were flagged, and whose employment was protected by the same institutional machinery that buried the 1947 Memo to Marshall. 2026. We owe Joe McCarthy an apology. The phrase circulates on social media. The claim travels with it that he was right about the infiltration the institutions had denied. The rehabilitation is organic. It rises from the files themselves, from readers who pull the declassified transcripts and the Venona tables and read what the institutions sealed for half a century. The movement has no organization, no funding, no spokesman. It has the one thing McCarthy never had. The proof finally in the open. St. Mary's Parish Cemetery, Appleton, Wisconsin. The stone is granite. The name is cut deep. The name is also a word. The word is in the dictionary. It means the thing the man was fighting against, dressed in his name. The files are open now. The investigations produced results. The pattern is documented. What the paper in his hand pointed at in the colonnade room of the McClure Hotel before 200 women in hats and gloves, who have all since died, was real.